The courtroom was silent. The attorneys, the jury, and the observers all knew what today's decision meant for Emily. She was a 15-year-old girl, caught in a fierce custody battle between her parents. Her father claimed that her mother was too irresponsible to take care of her, while her mother insisted that she had turned her life around and could now provide a stable future. Emily sat in her chair, gripping her hands tightly, her eyes locked on the judge. This person would determine her fate, but what she didn't know was,
Today, we are reviewing the custody case of young Emily Carter. Are both parties present?
Yes, Your Honor. I am here to protect my daughter. Her mother is completely irresponsible. Growing up under her care would be a disaster for Emily.
What gives you the right to say that, Marcus? People make mistakes, but I've fixed mine. I've turned my life around for our daughter.
Your Honor, my client may have made mistakes in the past, but that does not mean she should be denied a chance to rebuild her relationship with her child. Motherhood is not defined by financial status alone.
Your Honor, this is not about emotions. Our responsibility is to ensure Emily's safety, and if we look at her mother's past, we can clearly see a pattern of instability.
Emily struggled to contain the storm raging inside her. Who truly loved her? Where would she actually be safe? But the courtroom was waiting for her answer. And just as the moment of decision approached, Emily was asked to speak, but no one was prepared for what she was about to say. The courtroom was engulfed in a heavy silence. No one dared to speak. The jury members leaned forward slightly, hanging on to Emily Carter's every word. The attorneys clasped their hands together, their tense gazes fixed on the young girl. She was innocent, yet broken. Young, yet carrying the weight of years of pain. And now, she was about to say the most important words of her life. Emily took a deep breath. Her hands gripped the edge of her chair tightly. Her father, Marcus, was staring at her, waiting. Her mother was breathless, anticipating every word that would be said about her. But Emily wasn't focused on either of them. She was looking at someone else, a woman who sat with her head held high, her face unreadable, yet her eyes carried a shadow of hidden concern.
You want me to speak, right? Well then, listen carefully.
Every eye in the room was on her. Judge Charlotte Reynolds flicked her gaze down to the case files, as if trying to escape the moment. But Emily's voice had already captured her. Emily locked eyes with the judge, and then she dropped the bombshell.
Your Honor, you are my mother.
For a moment, time stood still in the courtroom. First, absolute silence. Then, the sound of shock, a sharp intake of breath, attorneys exchanging bewildered glances, the jury members raising their eyebrows in disbelief, the reporters scrambling to take notes, and then, an explosion. Murmurs spread like wildfire throughout the room. Journalists rushed to fix their microphones and cameras. Spectators turned to each other in stunned whispers. What did she just say? What does she mean? She's her mother. The judge? No way. Is this real? This case will go down in history. But there were two people who were the most shaken of all. One was Emily, who had finally voiced the truth she had carried inside for years. The other was Judge Charlotte Reynolds. The composed expression on her face shattered in an instant. Her shoulders stiffened, her fingers tightened around the gavel. But her eyes betrayed her.
This is ridiculous. Young lady, do you even realize what you're saying?
Emily clenched her fists and shook her head. No more lies, no more avoidance. She had spent her whole life being silenced, but now she would be heard.
There's one thing I do know. My whole life, I have questioned who I really am. A part of me always felt incomplete. I always knew something wasn't right, but no one gave me an explanation. They kept me in the dark, stole my story from me. But now the pieces are finally falling into place.
Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to wipe them away. She stared directly into Charlotte Reynolds' eyes.
You are the mother who abandoned me when I was born.
At that moment, the weight of her words shook the very foundation of the courtroom. Marcus Carter, Emily's father, suddenly bolted upright in his seat, his face a mixture of confusion and rage.
This is insane. You're my daughter's mother?
Every eye turned toward the judge. The expression on her face, the beads of sweat forming at her temples, the way her fingers dug into the wooden bench. She was trapped. Marcus's attorney turned to him, whispering frantically. Emily's mother gasped, her hands covering her mouth in disbelief. Reporters were writing at a frenzied pace, but Emily wasn't finished yet. She was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the rage of a child who had been lied to her entire life.
I'm asking you, Your Honor, where were you all these years? While I was searching for answers, while I was growing up with a hole in my heart, while I was wondering who I really was, who were you?
Charlotte Reynolds slowly placed her hands on the desk, exhaling deeply.
I had to protect you.
But Emily didn't want excuses. Not now. Not ever.
Did you protect me or did you abandon me? You left me in the hands of strangers. You never came back. You never told me the truth. So tell me, who are you really?
The judge's grip on her gavel tightened. Her gaze flickered downward, but there was nowhere to hide. The entire courtroom was watching her now. Sometimes people become judges in their own stories, but for Charlotte Reynolds, that was no longer an option, because today, the one being judged was her. And now, she had no choice but to face the truth. Judge Charlotte Reynolds leaned back in her chair, placing her hands on the desk. She avoided eye contact, struggling to find the right words. The prosecutors and attorneys exchanged stunned glances, trying to process what had just been revealed. Suddenly, Emily's father, Marcus, stood up abruptly.
This has to be some kind of joke. You're telling me that you are Emily's mother?
I had to protect her.
Emily let out a bitter laugh, her fists clenched.
Protect me? Protect me? You abandoned me. You left and never came back.
Charlotte took a deep breath, eyes momentarily closing. The weight of her past was crashing down on her. The courtroom was in chaos. Journalists scribbled frantically. Cameras clicked. Whispers filled the room. But Emily didn't care. She took a step forward, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes.
Tell me the truth, Judge Reynolds. Did you ever think about me? Even once? Did you wonder if I was safe? If I had someone who cared for me?
Charlotte hesitated.
Emily,
No, you don't get to explain this away. You don't get to defend yourself like you do in this courtroom.
For the first time in her career, Judge Charlotte Reynolds was the one on trial. Judge Charlotte Reynolds took a deep breath. The entire courtroom waited in breathless silence, hanging onto every word she was about to say. Her hands gripped the gavel tightly, her gaze lost in the distance. For the first time, the cold, unshaken judge wasn't in control. This case had started as just another custody battle, until her own past emerged from the very file she was meant to judge. Now, she was no longer the judge. She was the accused.
I had to do it. I was too young. I wasn't ready.
Emily clenched her fists, taking a step forward. Her voice wavered, but her rage masked the pain beneath it.
But did you never look back? Not even once? Did you never wonder who I was? Where I was? Did you ever think, even for a second, where is my daughter?
Charlotte turned her gaze away. For the first time in her life, she felt truly exposed. But Emily wasn't finished.
Do you know what it's like to dream of a mother you've never met? Every birthday, every single candle I blew out, I made the same wish. Maybe my mom will come back, but you never did. Where were you?
A heavy silence fell over the room. Reporters, jurors, attorneys, every single person was watching Charlotte. They weren't just witnessing a case anymore. They were watching a powerful woman crumble. Charlotte slowly lifted her head. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat.
I thought about you. I did, but I truly believed you would have a better life without me. I thought you would never forgive me.
Emily shook her head, unshed tears glistening in her eyes.
Forgive you? You left and you never looked back. You didn't even try. Did you ever check if I was safe? If I had a mother who loved me? If I was happy? Did you ever want to know?
Charlotte leaned back in her chair, gripping the edge of her bench. Her throat was tight, her chest heavy, but she didn't cry. She couldn't.
I was afraid that if I came back, you wouldn't want me, that if you knew the truth, you would hate me.
Emily's eyes darkened, her brows furrowing.
You were afraid of me, but you weren't afraid when you walked away. While I spent my whole life wondering where I came from, you did nothing. Every time you ran from the past, I was left alone.
Everyone in the courtroom bore witness to the weight of this moment. Charlotte Reynolds had entered this room as an unshakable judge, but now she stood exposed as a mother facing her sins. Marcus Carter leaned toward his attorney, his voice hushed but urgent.
Is this real? The judge? She's Emily's mother?
The attorney nodded gravely.
It appears so.
Charlotte felt the weight of every gaze upon her. She knew she had no choice but to face the truth. She straightened her posture, gathering the last remnants of her composure.
Emily, my daughter, I truly thought I was doing what was best for you, but perhaps my greatest mistake was believing that the best thing for you was not me.
Emily held her ground, her breath unsteady.
You can't change the past. But what you did, she gestured around the courtroom. You sat on that bench. You judged my life. You saw me as a case file. And the truth is, even you were too afraid to face your own past.
The weight of the truth settled over the courtroom. Judge Charlotte Reynolds was Emily's mother. But now, the real question remained. What happens next? Was Charlotte still the one making the decisions? Or had she just become the one being judged? And could Emily ever find it in her heart to forgive her? The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The kind that only comes before a storm. Because after this moment, nothing would ever be the same. Now, only one question remained. How would the trial proceed? Would she rule as a judge or as a mother? Emily questioned whether a woman who had never been a part of her life had the right to decide her future now. Her father was furious, and from this moment on, nothing in the courtroom would ever be the same. Is this the end, or just the beginning?